It wasn't really Rocktober till just then. Today I'm going to talk about falling down and getting up, and I'm talking not from the mountaintop today, if you get my drift, I'm not exactly in the trenches, but I'm somewhere in the middle between in the trenches and at the top of the mountaintop. It seems important for me to say that because of the topic, falling down and getting up. And I'm actually going to spend most of the time talking from Brene Brown's latest book, which is called Rising Strong. But I want to start with some scripture. I want to talk about the Gospel of John, which, just a little bit of Bible history, was written around 90, current era, around 90. And Bible scholars seem to think that it was written, one of the purposes, to show that Jesus came from God. This is from chapter 6. Jesus said to them, "I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never be hungry, and whoever believes in me will never be thirsty. But I said to you that you have seen me and yet do not believe. Everything that the Father gives me will come to me, and anyone who comes to me I will never drive away. For I have come down from heaven, not to do my own will, but the will of him who sent me. And this is the will of him who sent me, that I should lose nothing of all that he has given me. This is indeed the will of my Father." This is my favorite part coming up. "Then the Jews began to complain about him because he said, 'I am the bread that came down from heaven.' They were saying, 'Is not this Jesus, the son of Joseph, whose father and mother we know? How can he now say, 'I have come down from heaven'?" Jesus answered them, "Do not complain among yourselves. No one can come to me unless drawn by the Father. I will raise that person up on the last day." Okay, I will raise that person up. And then I'm just skipping over some parts. And then when many of his disciples heard it, they said, "This teaching is difficult. Who can accept it?" But Jesus, being aware that his disciples were complaining about it, said to them, "Does this offend you? Then what if you were to see the Son of Man ascending to where he was before? It is the Spirit that gives life. The flesh is useless. The words that I have spoken to you are spirit and life." Now, when we interpret Scripture, we like to take it into our hearts and use it as a mirror to ourselves. That's kind of the unity way to do it. But there's also a pretty good story, just like a just plain literature about the Jews began to complain. Like, don't we know this guy? And the reason I like that so much is because, yes, Jesus, was a person like us. I mean, that's one of the reasons I'm jumping on that bandwagon. A person like us, which means that although he represents the Christ within, fully realized, we have the same spark of divinity in us, okay? They could be saying, "Isn't that just Brian? I know his mother. How can he get up there and sing a beautiful song like that?" Okay. The other part that I really love about it is this teaching is difficult. Who can accept it? Don't you feel like that? Especially when you've fallen down. The teaching that the Christ is in me, that I come from heaven, and not just Jesus comes from heaven. Everybody here, okay, their spirit, we come. That's what we believe in unity, that we are the spark of divinity, that the Christ is within us. Within us. And I'm here to tell you that is a difficult teaching. It's one thing when the stars are in alignment and you're You're just totally expressing that God self and everything's gorgeous and wonderful, and you feel words of love coming from your mouth and your heart, and you're treating everyone with kindness. Okay, I can accept that teaching. It's completely different when you might have been a little bitchy or complaining. Maybe you're in somewhere between the trenches and the top of the mountain. Okay? It's a different thing. Well, this is why I love Brene Brown, because I believe that she gives us some absolutely fantastic tools, and yet she's written even another book which kind of explores another aspect of falling down and standing up. Okay, the one more little quote I wanted to emphasize is, this is in chapter 6, it's right in the middle of verse 44. I will raise that person up. Okay? Just remember that. I will raise that person up. Because the 3 points I'm going to make today, falling down, rising up, and that there will always be help. I have a lot of nerve telling you that there will always be help. I mean, that's going out on a limb. I'm not just saying there will always be help for me. I'm saying there will always be help for you, for everybody, not just in this room, but everybody. I think that takes a lot of nerve. Sometimes I can't believe it. But I do have that nerve. So, Brene Brown's book, which we are going to have a class in later this year, maybe even the beginning of next year. It's called Rising Strong. Here's a beautiful quote. This is Manifesto of the Brave and Brokenhearted. There is no greater threat to the critics and cynics and fearmongers than those of us who are willing to fall because we have learned how to rise. With skinned knees and bruised hearts, we choose owning our stories of struggle, over hiding, over hustling, over pretending. When we deny our stories, they define us. When we run from struggle, we are never free. So, we turn toward truth and look it in the eye. We will not be characters in our stories, not villains, not victims, not even heroes. We are the authors of our lives. We write our own daring endings. We craft love from heartbreak, compassion from shame, grace from disappointment, courage from failure. Showing up is our power. Story is our way home. Truth is our song. We are the brave and brokenhearted. We are rising strong. We are the brave and the brokenhearted. We are rising strong. So let me tell you some stories. I want to tell you some stories about people who I know who have managed to find that there is always help when they're down. I want to start with my friend Priya, because this is still one of the most dramatic stories I know. I think it triggers my anxieties. Priya was someone who came from Sri Lanka. I met her about, maybe 15 years ago now, but she came from Sri Lanka, and she married a man from America, New Jersey, I think. Got married to him, and was happily living in, he was a teacher, so they had actually were working in Australia. Priya and her husband were living in Australia. They didn't have children. He was a teacher, and he died. And she was devastated. He was her whole life. But when I met her, she was this amazing, holy vision of joy and love. She wasn't married to anybody else. She didn't change her life radically. And I said, how did you do that? What happened? And this is what she did. She sat with that grief and felt that loss for a couple of years. She said, there was a year where I did not go out. I just kind of sat and felt it and lived with it and always knew I would get through it. And always, and she kept sitting with it and doing whatever spiritual practice she did. And then the grief transformed. So that she really ended up in an altered state where the love of her husband was the only thing that was left. So that when she talks about her husband now, you don't feel the grief. You just feel the love and the joy. And she went, she's just one of the most amazing people I know. She actually she lived in Boulder for a while. She stayed a couple of weeks with me and then found my friend Patty, who needed somebody to live with her up in the mountains. And Priya just keeps finding people to live with and serve and communities to serve. I can't even explain her other than like she's one of the living saints. It's like if you meet her, you just look at her and you just feel, wow, there's the Christ. And I guess I can be that too. And, she's just a joy and a delight. And I love the lesson she taught me. That was a very good lesson for me because I still have fear around loss and still have some unresolved loss. I am not at that mountaintop where the losses in my life are only love. That is something I'm working through. In fact, I'm a little freaky today because Roland's going to go away for a week. And that triggers, I'll be really happy during the day because I'll be able to do whatever I want. But at night, I'll be miserable and I'll miss him. So I just know that. But it actually does trigger some loss. Everybody, you can't make it through. You can barely make it through age 3 without a little bit of loss, but you can't make it through to sitting in these chairs without experiencing some heavy loss. And like I said, I have not transformed all of my loss into love. It still sometimes feels like a loss, and so I'm still learning to do what Priya did. Somehow, Priya had that courage and the knowledge that if you that keep going through it. Keep going through it. Don't stop. Our superpower is showing up. That is just so true. Showing up exactly how you are in the moment. Not faking it and hiding it. That's also really hard for me. It is really hard for me to show up and not pretend to be okay. I would much rather pretend that everything's fine, but I'm just not very good at pretending anymore. So almost everybody who knows me can tell within a second. They would just rather I said, I am really crabby today instead of pretending to be happy. I think that's a mixed blessing about me. But the good part is that since I know I can't pretend very well, I have given myself permission to not pretend. It doesn't work every time, but I've given myself permission to not pretend, and I am now giving all of you a permission slip to not pretend. You do not have to pretend either. You can write it up yourself on a sticky note. That's another idea from Brené's book. Write yourself a permission slip to not pretend or whatever it is you need to do. That's one story. Now, the other story I want to tell is about my sister Celeste. My sister Celeste, as I like to say, because it's so juicy for me, I have 3 blonde, tall, Valkyrie-like sisters who have blue eyes and blonde hair, and they're all super athletes, and they do things like marathons and triathlons and stuff like that. 2, lawyers and doctors, whatever, It cracks me up. So that's my sisters. So Celeste, who is 1 year younger than me, she was experiencing chemo for breast cancer, and she was turning 50, and she decided that she would run the Loch Ness Marathon. She asked all of us if we wanted to do it with, the other sisters, and as it happened, no. I was not anywhere near running. And my other 2 sisters, who would have run with her, I think they both had injuries or something, so they didn't train with her. So she ended up going, and she had a friend and her husband, and she went. And I remember saying, Celeste, how did you do that? What happens? Because when you run a marathon, I think unless you run marathons all the time, or even if you do, you hit a point where you don't want to go on. You hit the wall. And I said, did you hit that wall? And she said, yes. I said, what did you do? He said, well, I knew that if I kept going, I would get through it. And I didn't want the cancer to win. I was going to win. Somehow that she had that knowledge in her. If I keep going, I will get through it. The spiritual point that I think in Unity we're really lucky to have this teaching that God is within us. Because that is something you can use as an anchor. You can use it any time. That even when you don't feel God is still there, because God isn't outside of you, God is inside us. It's a very important one. It's the good news of unity that's different than some of traditional Christianity that says you need to be saved by an outside force. You don't have to be saved. You already carry the Christ within you. I'm not saying that we know it all the time, and I'm not saying that I feel it all the time, and I definitely don't act it all the time. But I do know it all the time. And I invite all of us to keep that flame alive, or keep that as a rock solid part. Keep that as a default for yourself. Keep that as a message. The Christ is within you. Help is within you. There will always be help, because it doesn't have to come from outside. It comes right from you. The Gospel of John had a lot of words about it. It's through the Father. That was the representation at the time. That's what made sense to people. We just say it's in you. And of course, it's an unscientific thing that I'm talking about. It's a spiritual knowing. It's nothing that can be proved or measured, but it can be shared in these stories that people tell us. Roland has a falling down story. When we moved to Florida, I say we, but he started a business with one of our son-in-laws. And it was really a great business. And then 2007 and 2008 happened, and it was a countertop business in Southwest Florida. Well, Southwest Florida was one of the first and worst places hit with building recession. So he managed to hang on the whole time. We moved to Florida, he started the business, and then I decided I was going to go back to school. So he was staying in Florida, and then I was back in Missouri going to Unity Ministerial School. And I think that was probably he shared, that's one of the hardest times of his life, when that business was floundering, and we didn't know what we were going to do, and eventually he had to let the business go. I said, and the reason this story came up was, I said, when was a time that you knew you knew God was there, even though all appearances, I don't see God in this. I do not see God in the business going under. I do not see God in all the malls that aren't built and everything that was happening in Southwest Florida, and all the houses going backwards and all that stuff. And I said, how do you know? I said, I just knew if I kept going through it, it would be okay. If I kept going through it, it would be okay. So my last story happened just a couple of weeks ago when I was snorkeling. As it happened, I snorkeled twice. And the first time we snorkeled in this beautiful place in Bali. And it's always a little scary to go under the water. Even if, I'm a really great swimmer, but it's always a little scary. And, the mask might not fit and the snorkel, and and you're in there with all these fishes, and I'm kind of a squeamish person. I was never one of those animal lovers who like to touch anything. I can remember I was a little kid, I grew up in Seattle, we'd go to Puget Sound, and I didn't even like seaweed touching me, let alone a crab or a fish. I did not like anything touching me. And I sort of have that still. But I conquered that fear, and I got in, and this beautiful experience of sun and water and a million fish. And talk about feeling one with the universe. I was enchanted. It was just enchanting. I loved that day. Well, we decided to go snorkeling again because a few of our more friends joined us, and we wanted to take them. So we went snorkeling again. It's kind of a different day. It was a little stormy. We didn't go right in the same place, and it wasn't. And so it was so beautiful. So we snorkeled one place, then we ate lunch, and we snorkeled again. And the second time we went in, I saw a little jellyfish. And it was a teeny tiny little jellyfish with a little orange thing in the middle. And I thought, oh, well, there's jellyfish. That's okay. I'm cool. Let me just tell you, I'm very afraid of jellyfish. Even the kind that don't sting you. I can remember one of the fear times in my life was at summer camp that we were supposed to do a race. And mind you, this is jumping into Puget Sound, which is crazy anyway because it's cold. But we were going to do a race to the raft. And it was like field day or something, and I saw these white jellyfish. And the white jellyfish don't hurt you, in Puget Sound anyway. But I could not get in. And at that time, I think I might have been 12 or something, I couldn't admit that I was afraid of jellyfish. So I just don't feel good. It's like I tanked, and I couldn't admit that I was afraid of jellyfish. So I have a long-term fear of jellyfish. So I'm in the beautiful water in Bali, and there's a teeny tiny jellyfish. And then I get a little sting, and it doesn't sting much. It didn't last long, but a little sting. And I'm snorkeling, and then all of a sudden I realize there's jellyfish everywhere. There's like millions of jellyfish. They're not huge, but there's lots of them. So I'm about as afraid as a person. I'm more afraid of jellyfish than the sharks, which is silly because they're not that bad, but in that moment, I am very, very afraid. But I tell myself this truth. Okay, the other thing about this was I couldn't go back to the boat because this time they dumped us in one place and the boat was all the way down there. So I was going to have to swim to that boat no matter what. The boat wasn't going to come back and get me. And so I told myself, you can just go through it. You just go through it. So I alternated with, I suppose there were some times when I was like, okay, they're okay. And then one stung me on the face, in my mouth. It wasn't that bad. They're really tiny, it was much less than a bee sting. But it freaked me out, and I took my head up and took my mask off. I was like, oh, and everybody's getting stung. Everybody else is, I don't think any of us are liking it, but nobody's, panicked. So I got back in and just keep going through it, it'll be okay. And then there was a period where all the jellyfish were gone, so I'm like, yes, you just keep going through it, and then you get to the other side and there's no more jellyfish, and I'm going to remember this forever. This is great. I can hardly wait to tell everybody in Unity of Des Moines that you just keep going through it and the jellyfish are gone. Well, guess what happened? Swimming. Oh, I'm maybe about a third of the way, jellyfish. The next third, no jellyfish. Then, whoops, jellyfish again, between me and the boat. And it's funny. It was like I had a limited amount of bravery. I could feel myself thinking, okay, you did it before. You can do it again. Just keep swimming in the jellyfish. It doesn't matter. And the other thing I knew is that if I had really accepted, if I had just relaxed, because I was, trying to push them away when I'm swimming, which wasn't a really good strategy. I knew if I could have just floated and really, if I could have really just floated and been one with the ocean, not that many jellyfish would have hit me. And I am here to tell you I'm not there yet. I couldn't, I knew that that's where I wanted to be, but I couldn't be it. So I was pushing the jellyfish away. And then I saw the boat, and, just like, okay. But it was so beautiful. I mean, it wasn't just like swimming in a pool with jellyfish. There was unbelievable beauty and sweetness and, just so much fun to be under the water with beautiful fish and being able to breathe. It's like a miracle experience. So here's the miracle experience and the fear, right? Here's the miracle experience, here's the fear. And that was one of those times where, there was a little bit of, here's the miracle winning, the fear is winning. And so I just said, okay, I'm going to the boat. So I went back to the boat, climbed up, a few people were still snorkeling. So that was today. That was today, that's how it is. But the spiritual practice of showing up and going through it still works, even if the jellyfish come back. And I know that with the kind of knowing that I can't scientifically explain. There's not obviously there's not jellyfish everywhere in the ocean. Obviously, sometimes there is, and sometimes there are sharks. Okay? The ocean is full of everything. Our life is full of everything. Our lives are full of jellyfish and sharks, as well as the times when it's just beautiful and awesome and you're looking at fish. The gift of getting up and showing up is that you get to have the connection, the beauty, the knowing you're one. And as long as you keep trying, here's the beauty of us. Showing up is our power. Story is our way home. Truth is our song. We are the brave and brokenhearted. We are rising strong. We all know that we have the Christ within us. And this week, I hope y'all remember to rise strong and remind your friends and your loved ones that they too, they just show up. That's half of the ticket. And then connect to that Christ, and then get up. Let's take an offering for unity.